Hello, my name is Dan Skipbound, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where myself and my guests talk about a topic. It could be an actor, a director, an actress, or a genre, or whatever. Because of there's no movies in theaters right now, a few years ago, on the first iteration of the Top 5 Weekly, I did an entire month of classic topics. And we were going to originally schedule that for August, but because there's no movies, I thought, hey, what the heck? Why not do it in May? So we're going to be doing some classic topics. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about the legendary Jimmy Stewart. And I don't do this show alone. It'd be pretty boring if I did. So I always do it with some buddies of mine or some people that have a lot of good insight in the topic. And so I'm going to bring in my two good buddies that we haven't had on the Top 5 Weekly in quite a while. They did the first couple episodes of the new iteration, Mr. Andrew Cabral and Stephen Billings. Andrew, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, Stephen. I'm so used to talking to Stephen all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm doing well, Dan. I'm glad to be back and talking about Jimmy Stewart, which is going to be really exciting. He's one of my all-time favorites. So when Dan initially asked me if I wanted to do Jimmy Stewart, I said, yeah, why not? I watched so much of his stuff.
Stewart.
Yeah, I want to do Jimmy Stewart.
And of course, Stephen, another one of my good buddies these guys were on the first iteration of the Top 5 Weekly. And then when I brought it back, they were on the first couple episodes and they haven't been on since November. So when I decided to do classic, I was like, I asked these guys first because I know these guys have a love of classic films and classic topics. So Stephen, glad to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, man, it's good to get the old crew back together so we can talk some Jimmy Stewart. Hopefully we don't have too much overlap. I mean, I'm sure there's a few movies that might get talked about multiple times, but Jimmy Stewart's got such a interesting, I think he did like 100, he's got like 100 acting credits. Exactly. And he did so many different types of roles, So yeah, this will be fun to see where we go with this.
Yeah. I wanted to watch a bunch of Jimmy Stewart movies preparing for this, but I've seen so many as it is. So I was only able to watch one before because I was watching another topic where I was watching all the other person's movies from a different topic that I was doing, so I didn't have a chance to watch. But I do have this whole stack of Jimmy Stewart movies right here that I was trying to watch, but didn't have time to watch them. What are you gonna do?
Time to bullshit. Let's do it.
Yeah. So, all right.
Fake it till you break it.
Yeah. So, I always let my guests go first. So, Andrew, you're the first person to my right, so I guess you get to go first. Stephen was the first person to my. When I brought you guys back in, it switched.
Broke in line, Andrew.
I know I broke the wheel. So I guess I'll go first. My number five. Well, before I get into my list, I just want to say the first two picks are going to be interesting, but this first one, I don't know if you guys are going to have it, but perhaps you will. First one, number 5 is Harvey.
I got it.
You have it. Damn, Steven.
Yeah, I had a feeling someone might have Harvey. I didn't know it was going to be Andrew. I thought it was going to be Stephen, but I do not have Harvey. So where's Harvey on your list, Stephen? Further down on your list?
It's further down my list, yeah.
Okay, so we can't talk about Harvey.
Okay.
Stephen, what is your number 5?
I decided to go with I think one of his, something that's a little bit more. It was a little later in his career. And it's kind of like, I think, a little bit outside of what you used to see him do. This is more of an action-adventure movie, and that's Flight of the Phoenix.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I've seen it, but I do not have that on my list.
Yeah, Flight of the Phoenix. Let me make sure I get the date right. It's directed by Robert Aldridge. He's done a lot of great films. He did, like, Kiss Me Deadly and stuff like that. But this one came out in 1965. And it's also stars, like Richard Attenborough, young Richard Attenborough and Peter Finch. And basically, I mean, they did a remake, I think in the 2000s, it had like Dennis Quaid in it. But basically the plane goes down in the desert and it's a survival movie. And, a lot of what this movie's about is about international cooperation. You know, you got like people from different backgrounds trying to work together to survive. You know, one of them's an American, one of them's an Englishman, one of them's German. And of course, you know, being that we were coming out of World War II, 20 years before that, still kind of dealing with, you know, them ideas. We still deal with them ideas about trusting people from foreign countries and things like that. So like, it's a good survival movie, good action adventure. It's really well shot, well acted. It's a good watch.
Yeah, I seen it many years ago. You're right. It is a good watch. Andrew, you got any thoughts on Flight of the Phoenix?
I don't even remember if I've seen it, so I think I have seen it because I know I've not seen the remake, but Robert Aldrich, I have not seen. No, wait a minute, hold on. I have seen Flight of the Phoenix. Yeah, and I also remember it being a bit of a survival movie because they crash land in, I want to say the desert or something like that.
That's what I said, Andrew.
Oh yeah, I'm spacing off. But I remember just the climax of the film being really.
It's got some great the plane crashes are really great.
Yeah,
I mean it's got some great stunts for that time, and it's kind of like one of them old school, kind of epics. It's a long, it's got some length to the movie. It's like 2.5 hours long. It's part of that last little bit of them big epic movies shot on location, that we had with like Lawrence of Arabia and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good stuff.
Also Robert Aldrich also directed Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and The Dirty Dozen. So he was really, really good director.
Yeah, that's so far you named some good movies there. That's a good filmography. My number 5 is a little movie called all right, I have it right here. Rear Window, where he plays the character. Does anybody have Rear Window?
Yeah.
I don't have it on my list.
What?
No,
Andrew.
That was one of the things I wanted to say is that I didn't want to have the same director twice on the list because we only have 5 spots.
Well, then I think I know what you're going to pick.
Yeah, I had to choose. If I had to choose two Hitchcocks with Jimmy Stewart, actually, there's 3 Hitchcock films with Jimmy Stewart. But, but I had to. I had to choose the other one because it's one of my favorites.
So I can't talk about Rear Window just yet because
not yet.
Got that. So we're going back to Andrew for his number 4.
My number 4 is the. I wanted to put one of his westerns on the list just because I don't think a lot of people still view Jimmy Stewart as a western actor. At least initially, I struggled with the concept of him being like in an action movie and it being believable. But this film is actually not an action movie, but it is a western. It's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Yeah,
anyone have it?
I haven't seen it, so
I do not have it on my list, but I had it in my pile. I was going to watch.
Right. It's actually my favorite John Ford film, so that's why I've also included it. It's a film that stars, of course, Jimmy Stewart, but also John Wayne, Vera Miles, Lee Marvin's in the film as a heavy, which is basically all he played up until a certain point of his career.
Yeah,
just bad guys, just brooding and stuff. But it came out in 1962, and it's interesting because it's a contemplative, more intelligent type of western. It's not, something that's an exploration of the West. It's not something that's, Native Americans versus cowboys or a like a cavalry film or anything like that. It's a very small film of kind of like myth versus legend versus reality. Basically, it's a film that takes place in flashback form with the Jimmy Stewart character returning to this town that he was in when he was younger, and the things that went down there are remembered in a fantastical, legendary way, but we're told what the actual truth was, and what the actual truth is not what is believed to be. So it's a really fascinating play on that. And also really fascinating when you have the John Wayne character, who's very, much like John Wayne played everyone in his career, macho, super confident machismo, the John Wayne that you pretty much people know
Get
as an
off
icon.
My lawn.
Yeah, that John Wayne.
Asshole.
And you've got kind of a skinny, frail, Jimmy Stewart character who's kind of a wimp, but he's like an intellectual from a big city or something like that. So you get these two dynamics of those two characters and how they approach situations and whatnot. And at the center of it's kind of like a bit of a love triangle, which is also fascinating as well. But I really love just like the diverse aspect of this film when it comes to John Ford's filmography, and seeing Jimmy Stewart in a Western where he doesn't have to be like a rough and tough guy. But he did do that very, very well in the Anthony Mann films, like Winchester 73, Naked Spur, stuff like that. He was very believable.
It's kind of like, you know, because a lot of people compare Jimmy Stewart to kind of like Tom Hanks. Both of them are kind of like the everyman, the relatable guy. And, you know, some people don't believe that Tom Hanks used to do comedy nowadays, which is kind of weird because that's all he used to do, you know. But, you know, he's usually known for being the dramatic actor. So, yeah, they both kind of had that, I think, that moment in their career where they're, you know, probably were doubted for being able to do certain roles. But yeah, I mean, they both did everything. So
yeah, Jimmy Stewart's great opposite John Wayne in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And, you know, it just shows you the types of movies. He could just do anything, you know, Westerns, you know, noir. He was like the family man, where the guy where you could always feel sorry for him, or he was the guy in the wrong place a lot of the times, getting involved in things like that. And so it didn't matter what genre it was at that time. Jimmy Stewart could just do it all. And he just did it great.
He also just worked with the best filmmakers, I think, you know, like he was always getting to work with Hitchcock or you know, Prominger or somebody, you know,
Frank Capra. He worked with
Frank Capra.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. It helps when you get to work with the best filmmakers. You get to make your movies end up being the movies that people want to see, you know?
Yeah.
And so they resonate a lot more with people that way as well. All right, so we're going to Steven's number 4, I believe.
My number 4, you know, it's kind of a role that he played a couple times, playing like well, not maybe not a couple times, but playing kind of like either a politician or a lawyer or this one I choose Anatomy of a Murder.
Ooh, good one.
Anybody?
I don't know my honorable mentions, but not in my.
Oh, come on! I thought Andrew was definitely going to have that one.
I thought about it, but I wanted to get Harvey in, and I wanted to get Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in.
Well, this is a, you know, a courtroom drama, which I love courtroom dramas. And it very much, and it's directed by Otto Preminger. I don't know how you say his name.
Preminger. Yeah.
And he directs very well this black and white courtroom drama. You know, it's what's great about it is it doesn't really take a side. It kind of shows how everybody's morally complicated, you know, and that's, I think, what makes this such a engaging courtroom drama, because you're not really sure whose side to take. You just go along with Jimmy Stewart trying to defend this person, and you know, the innocent bystanders are always just, you know, you feel sorry for them, and you know, it's it's long. It's also very long. I think it's almost 3 hours long, isn't it? It's like 2:45.
Yeah, 2 hours and 41 minutes.
Yeah, it's a good length, but it does keep you very engaged. And Jimmy Stewart puts on, I think, one of his best performances in that movie. So if you're wanting to see Jimmy Stewart in a very serious, you know, like role that, you know, is one of his best, I would say go with Anatomy of a Murder. Yeah,
I love Anatomy of a Murder. I bought the Criterion last year or the year before or whenever, and threw that thing in right away and watched it. And I absolutely loved it, because I don't think I had seen it up until that point. That's, you know, I'm preaching to the choir to you guys when I'm talking about the Criterion Collection, where they have saved so many great films. And it's like, you look at it and you're like, they have films from the greatest actors, the greatest directors, you know. So if you're looking for good movies that you can't find anywhere, look for the Criterion Collection. You might find some great classics. Andrew, you got any thoughts on Anatomy of a Murder?
Anatomy of a Murder is fantastic. When it came to courtroom dramas, I think it kind of was one of the ones that set up the blueprint for courtroom dramas as we know them. I think it was so like specifically accurate that I can't remember if it was some authority. I don't know if it was the government or somebody was like, did you steal this from somewhere or something like that? There's a whole trivia thing behind that. But the film also stars Lee Remick, who is a really underrated actress. She was in like movies like Days of Wine and Roses and The Omen. She's a really great actress. She's kind of at the center of the whole courtroom case in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of courtroom dramas, and that's a good one. And we're talking about Witness for the Prosecution on another, and I haven't seen that yet. So I really want to see. I have to Witness for the
another long one.
Yeah, it is.
I want to see that one. All right, so we're back to me. Probably another one that somebody's got on their list more than likely. I got the number 4 is the Philadelphia Story. Does anybody have that?
No.
Well, the Philadelphia Story, another Criterion I bought, but this one's got a great cast. It's got Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and Jimmy Stewart. And Katharine Hepburn is this bigger-than-life character in this movie, and she basically is doing her own thing and having her own, and these guys are just kind of following her. Jimmy Stewart plays a reporter, and Hepburn is like a big shot in the movie, and Jimmy Stewart plays a reporter. Cary Grant is just a guy that's kind of her ex-husband, but he wants to get back with her, and Jimmy Stewart's like this reporter guy that's kind of reporting on this and this stuff that's going on in the movie. I can't remember what
it's a wedding.
A wedding, that's what it was.
She's getting remarried.
Yeah, she's getting remarried, and Cary Grant goes back to the wedding, and Jimmy Stewart's coming to the wedding to report, like you said, on the wedding and stuff like that. And they have this kind of like, they do that back in the day, the 50s, the 40s, the 60s. They have this one woman, two men, and they're trying to chase after this one woman a lot. And when you get 3 heavyweights like these 3, you're going to have explosions. What I mean by explosions, like verbal.
That's Dirty Dan.
Dialogue, great back and forth between these 3 actors and stuff like that. And Jimmy Stewart holds his own with 2 of the greats of that era. And that's the thing about Jimmy Stewart. He's just one of the greats, and he wanted to work with the greats. And this is Hepburn got George Cukor to come on and direct the Philadelphia Story. So you had a great director, and you had 3 great actors acting opposite each other. And Andrew said The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, you had a great director, and then him opposite John Wayne. It's like Jimmy Stewart's always in the best movies, acting opposite or being directed by the best people. And so, the Philadelphia Story is his only, and I cannot believe this, I believe it's his only Academy Award winning film he's ever done in his entire career. That is ridiculous. Jimmy Stewart has only got 1 Academy Award in his entire career. The guy should have won 10 Academy Awards probably.
Yeah, it happens, and we know that the Academy Awards doesn't really mean much. So
not anymore. Not like
he was nominated a bunch of times.
Oh yeah, I would doubt that. Oh, of course, he probably should have won like all the great actors should have won 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And the ones that do win that many, they're just in the right place at the right time, probably. Thoughts on the Philadelphia Story, Andrew?
Yeah, Philadelphia Story is I think one of the. It's a classic. You know what I mean? It stars 3 of the most iconic, classic actors from the golden age of Hollywood in Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, and Katharine Hepburn. They're elite in that regard. I love the interplay between the 3. I love how like the film is also like a comedy, but it's a romance and it's a drama as well. It was remade into high society, like I think about 15 years after this movie, starring like Bing Crosby, Grace Kelly, and Frank Sinatra. But it's a movie that I think was also based on a stage play. And George Cukor is a really good director. George Cukor directed things like My Fair Lady, as well as what else did he direct? He directed. He only coincidentally has one Oscar win as well. That's which is very interesting. He directed A Star Is Born, which is another film from that era with another iconic star in Judy Garland. So I mean, he was working with stars back then, clearly. But yeah, I really like the Philadelphia Story a lot.
Steven, you got any thoughts on the Philadelphia?
And can't say much more than what you guys have already said. I mean, it's a great ensemble. It's one of them kind of founding, great foundations for what became the cliche of that genre. Of course I love It Happened One Night, and that's kind of the start of that rom-com-y kind of formula. But this one's part of that too. This also, that foundation for the love triangle, so I mean it's a foundation film, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my number 4. Andrew, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is perhaps on one of you guys' lists. There's a good chance. My number 3 is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yes,
I have that at number 3.
I bet at number 2. So
all right, so we have to wait a little while.
I don't know if you're gonna know it.
Bitches.
Steve and I work so much together that we may share the same brain.
Sometimes you've caught me off guard a couple times so far on this one.
I know.
So.
But I mean,
all right, so we'll hold off on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We're gonna go back to Steven for his number 3.
Well, it's Harvey. So we can talk about Harvey now.
Yay.
Well, Harvey's a very interesting movie. It's Jimmy Stewart plays this, kind of happy-go-lucky guy who apparently has an imaginary friend that, and people think he's psychotic, and his sister wants to send him to the loony bin. But, is this Harvey, this rabbit, real, or is, do we really know? I don't know. So, you got to kind of go on the adventure. I don't want to spoil the whole movie, but shut up, Danny. You know what you're talking about.
I saw the movie.
He is real.
He's not real.
But I think it's a very good kind of, sentimental, also, kind of makes you think about how you should treat people. It's and that, people's actions are not always what they seem, or, like you should be a little bit more investigative about people instead of just judging them from certain things, certain point of view. So, I mean, it's a very good movie. It's funny. It's got some great moments. I really enjoy it. So yeah, Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I love how charming the movie is and how idealistic it is, and just how pure the Jimmy Stewart character is. Like, he's just like uncompromisingly pure throughout the entire movie. And it's just, there's so much universal like themes going on within his character about being good natured, being kind, and just, being optimistic versus pessimistic and something like that. And I also like how the people around him seem like the ones who are more crazy and unhinged than him, and he's the one that's supposed to be the crazy unhinged one. And it's a really funny screwball comedy at times as well. His sister character, I don't want to spoil it, but she accidentally gets put into the mental hospital asylum, if you will.
Whatever. Yeah.
I didn't want to say insane asylum.
Asylum's a little harsh. Maybe.
Yeah, a little harsh. Hospital. I was going to say mental hospital. Or psychiatric hospital is probably the best way to put that. But just like her comedy of errors and stuff like that is really, really funny. And the relationship he has with Harvey, I think, is really fascinating as well. Whether Harvey is real or not, I don't think is so much important as what Harvey is and what Harvey represents and how he interacts with Harvey, I think, is the most important part of the movie.
And a great double feature is Donnie Darko.
Oh, no. I knew it.
Yeah, or Roger Rabbit, because they literally reference Harvey in Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Watching it when I was like 2 or 3 years old, I didn't know what Harvey was.
Well, actually, the first time I actually had, without knowing at the time, had seen a part of this movie was in Field of Dreams. There's a scene in Field of Dreams where his daughter's watching TV and this movie is on. And then because, in the movie, he's talking to an imaginary rabbit, and of course, Kevin Costner is hearing voices in a cornfield. He's like, turn that TV off. That guy's sick. He's sick. You know?
Yeah, I know.
So,
Now, I was gonna say the same thing. I was like, I wonder if they got the idea for Donnie Darko from Harvey. You know,
yeah, well, that's just the opposite version where it's a demonic rabbit. You know, that's
not your it is your friend, but not your friend.
and why is it all of a sudden when people have imaginary friends, they're rabbits all of a sudden? Whatever.
It's you know, it's part of, you know, mythological, you know, it's legend. You know, people were using mythics in all different types of movies. We know that. So
okay,
but that's just, you know, because in the movie Harvey he calls it what a paku or something. What does he call it?
Haiku.
A paku or something like that. And if you look up what that is, it's like a mischievous god that, like, you know, that's why I say, is he real or is he not? You know, like, we don't really know, but we don't ever really see him. But, you know, it's played that maybe he is real. But like he's some like Loki type of character that is mischievous. He can sometimes be in your favor, sometimes he's against you. But, you know, it's in this particular movie, they play off the fact that his good nature makes Harvey basically be his good luck charm, I guess you could say. So,
yeah. And one thing you didn't mention about it's a beautiful movie. It's in color, right? And
no, black and white.
Oh, really?
But there is a remake. There's a TV remake that Jimmy Stewart actually did years later. That's in color.
Oh, because I saw a color version of Harvey.
And there's also a remake of it in the 90s.
Is there?
Yeah, in 96, I think. Yes, and it's okay. Apparently, I haven't seen it, but apparently it's just okay. But the original version, which is 1950, is black and white.
Okay, because I could have swore I saw it with Jimmy Stewart and it was in color. I'm like, I imagine now. Am I the one imagining things? Because
it was a TV movie.
Yeah,
they redid it. Yeah,
1972. He reprised his character.
Okay.
That's
why.
But he also performed it apparently on stage as well. So he was he knew the Elwood P. Dowd character very well.
Yeah, obviously. All right, so my number 3 was the same as Andrew's number 3, and we couldn't talk about it because Steven had it at number 2. So we're going back to Andrew for his number 2, I believe.
It's a good thing you're here to keep track of all this. All these numbers are getting thrown around. My number 2 is Vertigo.
Can't talk about that, Andrew.
Shocker.
So that means we're going back to Steven to talk about number 2, which is our number 3. That's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Since Steven's up for number 2, go ahead. And then Andrew, then I'll go last.
You know, Frank Capra, you know, known for his very optimistic view at the world, and he does it well here in this movie where you got Jimmy Stewart, who's this kind of like young politician that's trying to make his way into Washington, and he of course is just, you know, he doesn't know his way. He's just so optimistic. Everybody's like, you're fucking not gonna make it here. You ain't gonna last. Stupid idiot. You gotta be a liar. You gotta be a cheater. You gotta do bad things to get in this town, you know? And he's, you know, everybody knows the ending of this movie where he has the filibuster and he like stays in the, you know, House of Representatives or whatever for like a whole day or whatever it is. And it's a great scene. It's one of his best performances once again, and he didn't win for it. I'm assuming. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great optimistic, you know, movie that maybe is a little naive, but it's still great to see it in movie form.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's an absolute great film. Jimmy Stewart should have won an Oscar for this, and it really gets you an idea. You really kind of learn the ins and outs of politics through this movie in some way, if you didn't know the ins and outs about and how sadistic people can get about things when they want things to go their way, and the manipulation and who they can manipulate to get them to go on their side so things can go their way and stuff like that. And like you said, he was a young, new, up and coming politician, you know, and he didn't know the ropes there but he found out the hard way. And like you said, it's got a great ending. So Andrew.
Yeah, it's a fantastic, amazingly contemporary movie for a film that came out in 1939. The way in which, the poisonous nature of politics in the United States is very, very similar now than it was back in 1939. It granted now it's much larger, more elaborate and all that kind of stuff, but it's the same things. Like you gotta know the right people. You gotta pay off the right people. You gotta be an influencer here, influencer there, and just to get things done. And the Jimmy Stewart character is just this naive guy. He's not even a politician. He's like a Boy Scout leader in his home state.
Yeah,
And
you're right. Yeah,
they have to just fill a Senate seat. So they're just like, okay, let's get this guy. He doesn't know what he's doing. We can tell him to do whatever. You know what I mean? He's just going to be a puppet.
It's kind of like facing the crowd.
Yeah, kind of like a face in the crowd, Eli Kazan's film. And but what happens is, he figures it out after a while that this is a terrible system. You know what I mean? It's awful. The film also, like I said, directed by Frank Capra, who had a really amazing run of movies in the 1930s. He did like Mr. Deeds Comes to Town. Another film he did back then was You Can't Take It With You. It's another great film. He was really kind of owning the 30s when it came to like
It Happened
Oscars.
One Night.
Was that?
It Happened One Night.
It Happened One Night.
40, yeah.
And then and it kind of continued a little bit into the 1940s, but his collaboration with Jimmy Stewart is really fantastic. Also in the movie you have Jean Arthur and Claude Rains. And I just want to mention them because I think Jean Arthur is kind of an underrated actress. I think she's really, really good in this movie as kind of like, I think she's like a reporter, and she's kind of like covering the Jimmy Stewart character, and she kind of ingratiates herself to him. She kind of feels bad for how, much he's being screwed around by the system, and she tries to like assist him and help him. But she was a great actress, and she was in like Only Angels Have Wings, and she was also in Shane. Really great actress. But Claude Rains, I think, is an actor most people should know. He was in a lot of movies back then, including Casablanca, one of my all-time favorites.
My favorite, my number one movie of all time.
That was a shout out for you, Dan, because I knew it was.
So cliche.
Yeah, I love Claude Rains. Love Claude Rains. So that brings us to Steven's number 2. Is it? No, it's
You're next.
My number 2. My number 2 is It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey.
I have it on my list.
You do?
Yeah, spoiler alert.
We have to move that. All right, we can't talk about that yet. So that means we're going to Andrew's number 1, which is, well, if your number 1 is, okay, so we can talk about it.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about it.
Yeah, because you're next in line anyway, so we can talk. So It's a Wonderful Life. It's this down on his luck guy, George Bailey, in this cold town of Illinois. I think it's in Illinois. And he's just kind of, things are just unraveling for him. He can't pay his bills. His job is not, doing what he needs to do. And he just is about to give up, and he's about to jump off a bridge. And this angel comes down from heaven and starts talking to him. And it starts giving him a new outlook on life by going back and looking at different things, or going and seeing how things would be if he killed himself, or if he did this, or if he did that, or what the different scenarios would be if he was no longer alive. And I think Jimmy Stewart's work with Alfred Hitchcock is phenomenal. To me, he just seems to be at home working with Alfred Hitchcock. But when you ask people about the most iconic Jimmy Stewart performance, people are going to say George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. And I watch it every Christmas. I even got the 4K Blu-ray of it, and so I can watch my TV, my 4K TV, and it just is beautiful. It's a beautiful film. The snow and the dark and the black and white really contrast beautifully.
You're not going to watch you don't watch the colorized version?
I know.
No.
What a garbage fest that must be.
I do not watch the colorized version. I watch black and white of It's a Wonderful Life. And it's easily one of the greatest films of all time, in my opinion. You might have other arguments, but I think it's one of the greatest. Andrew, what do you got to say about It's a Wonderful Life?
One of the fascinating aspects I find about It's a Wonderful Life is that what Dan just described is what kind of everyone remembers about that movie. And what Dan just described, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, is only the third act of the movie. There's 2/3 of this movie that have nothing to do with what Dan just described. It's just all about the George Bailey character and his life and meeting his future wife and Donna Reed's character, and just like taking responsibility for the family business when his brother kind of just leaves and goes screws off someplace else. And it's just like you're just seeing the character of George Bailey grow over time, and it's just a fascinating just to watch him grow and watch him see how his life turns out, and the way in which Jimmy Stewart ingratiates himself to you as a viewer is just so fantastic, because he hits on so many universal themes as a character when it comes to, finding love and happiness, and, and taking responsibility for certain things, and trying to fix up the town of Bedford Falls and giving those less fortunate homes and loans and stuff like that, because he works at a bank and whatnot. And then but then it also kind of works itself into real life society with a stock market crash and how that whole business goes under, and you see how he has to adapt to that situation and whatnot. So it's a film that really kind of tried to interweave what people were going through in their lives, not so soon beforehand, because the film came out 1946 and the Great Depression happened 1929 and throughout the 30s. So you get people who remember the Great Depression and remember things like that, and remember being so desperate that they would want to, like Dan said, commit suicide, essentially what he tries to do. But then the film, redeems his character and injects new life and hope into people who may not have any. So the film is an all-time fantastic film. And like we've been saying, Frank Capra, if you've never seen Frank Capra movies, watch them, because they're great and they're very contemporary.
Yeah, and they have a message. The thing is, films from back then, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, they didn't have special effects. They didn't have all the fandangle things that they have today in movies. They had to have great scripts and stories that could just suck you in. And It's a Wonderful Life sucks you in from the very moment it starts. Steven, you got any thoughts?
I mean, yeah, said it all. Once again, it's another in a sense, it's a kind of another foundational, story that kind of gets repeated. Of course, this is kind of inspired by the Christmas Carol, where you got different ghosts that come and visit a man. But in this case, I would say the man that we're focusing on is a little more complicated, and it's obviously a little darker of a situation. A man deciding he wants to end his life, but now he needs a reason to live on. And in the Christmas Carol, it's about somebody that's, morally, compromised. He hoards all his money. He doesn't give to people, and he needs to be reminded why he should. So it's definitely a different story, but it's once again, it's another kind of, you could say, trait, film trait that gets repeated over and over again throughout different genres of movies since it came out. So it's once again another movie that inspired a lot of other films. So it's definitely one of the greats.
All right. So now we're going to Steven for his number one.
Okay. Well, the Hitchcock movie had to get in here somewhere. And the one that I always love to go back to, I think it's maybe not, people might not consider it to be the best Hitchcock or the best Jimmy Stewart or whatever, but it's to me, the most accessible, rewatchable one, and that's Rear Window. I mean, I love this movie. I love that it's kind of a single location movie. You're stuck in an apartment complex where Jimmy Stewart is out for the count because he's broken his leg, and he's this kind of like, international reporter type that goes and he's stuck in his room healing. And you got Grace Kelly, who is gorgeous in this movie. It's part of the reason I just keep watching this movie is just Grace Kelly. And she's, his like girlfriend, but Jimmy Stewart's like not committal. And I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. Like it's Grace Kelly. and so he's stuck in it, and he's peeping in, he's people watching with his binoculars, and he thinks he's witnessed one of his neighbors murdering somebody, and so he's trying to figure it out just from that room, and it's very suspenseful, very well shot, of course, very well acted, and it's just an all-time favorite of mine. It's in my top movies of all time. I mean, it's not just Hitchcock or Jimmy Stewart, just I'd say probably top 20, 25 of all time. It's just a classic. Once again, another movie that's gotten kind of redone. I think there's a movie coming out this year that kind of plays off of it. The one with Amy Adams that's coming out.
Based on a book called Lady in the Window.
Yeah, that movie's basically kind of like a different version of Rear Window. You had Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. That was a ripoff of this, and it's a classic kind of story that can be told in different ways that people have done it, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. That's why it was number 5 on my list. I just love the everyman kind of thing with Jimmy Stewart, and he ends up getting hit by a car because he was filming race cars at a racetrack. So he ends up stuck in his house, and his girlfriend, Lisa Fremont, Grace Kelly, she's basically serving him at his beck and call because he can't do anything. And the thing about it is you see so much out that window. What he does, what Hitchcock does with the camera. You see the people coming by in the street, and then you see the dog, and then different windows and what's going on in all the different windows and stuff. And of course, Raymond Burr, which we all remember as like this guy's considered a good guy. He's one of the great guys, because he's a lawyer and he's in a wheelchair. What's the show? They got a remake of it with Matthew Rhys on HBO coming out.
I know.
The show. He's a lawyer.
Ironside.
Is that it?
Yeah, Ironside.
No, that's not the remake they're doing.
He was also Perry Mason.
Perry Mason. That's it. He was Perry Mason.
Yeah, well,
long time good guy in a wheelchair fighting the law, but he was the bad guy in Rear Window, and he was a nasty character. I mean, I was like, man, I would not want to mess with this guy. And when he finds out Jeff Jeffries, that's Jimmy Stewart, has done something wrong, and they've been in his apartment, man, does he come over there. And everything, the sound effects to just so much what Hitchcock does with the camera is fantastic in this.
I was going to say the sound is very important in this movie.
Yeah. But Jimmy Stewart's a guy. He's that guy that you can't help but not like. So no matter what movie he's in, you like him. Even when he's the villain in a movie. He's the villain in, I believe, Liberty Valance, right? He's the villain?
No, Lee Marvin is.
Okay. He's a villain in something. I just can't remember what he's the villain in. But he's a great guy. And you want the relationship to work between Lisa Fremont and him, because you like her and you like him, and you're like, oh, that's a cute couple, and they're dealing with this craziness. But I always put Rear Window in Hitchcock. It's my Hitchcock top 5. I put it in there. Jimmy Stewart top 5. I'm going to put it in there. Spoiler alert: Grace Kelly. No, I'm not going to say anything right now, Andrew.
I'll just say this. There's about to be a lot of Alfred Hitchcock talk very, very soon.
I knew there was going. When we had Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly, I was like, oh, God. Okay, we're going to be
And we just talked about it on our recent episode of Cinema Discovery Project.
I have
nice
I
plug.
Listened to it. I got to listen to it.
Yeah.
I got to listen to that new episode. I got it queued up. I haven't listened to it. So, yeah, I had Rear Window at number 5. And once again, Alfred Hitchcock. I'm not like these guys. I didn't care if I had 2 Alfred Hitchcock movies, because Jimmy Stewart is great in both of these movies. But this is the role that at one point in time, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, Vertigo was the number 1 movie on AFI's top 100 movies of all time, I believe. Not in the last decade or something like that.
I think it goes back and forth between that and Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, I think, is Sight and Sound.
Somewhere.
Yeah,
I knew it was
Sound
number
magazine
1 on something. And Vertigo, it has such a great twist in it, but you just believe in the John Ferguson character. You're like, this guy, he knows what's going. He's the guy that, okay, he knows what's going on, and he knows that something is up. And when he finds the girl after he thinks she disappeared, and he turns the other girl into the other girl, and then and then also San Francisco is an absolute character in Vertigo. It's such a beautiful film. Hitchcock knew how to film the city and film the places that they went. It's just, and when you have mental illnesses and things that are wrong with your mind, and you can believe in all kinds of, and because it's Jimmy Stewart, okay, he's sick in the head with vertigo. He knows he can't go up here and he can't go do that. So, if he goes up there, better look out. Something's going to happen, and there's little things like that you're just right along for the ride with John Ferguson, the Jimmy Stewart character. Andrew, I know you had this at number 2, I believe.
Yes, I had this at number 2. It's my second favorite Alfred Hitchcock film of all time. And it's a film that when it came out was actually hated. It was panned, and people didn't like it. It was all that kind of stuff. And for me, but over time, it's been reevaluated several times, and now it's an all-time classic. It's a film that I think just delves into so many psychological themes, specifically within the Jimmy Stewart character. And Dan, you were just talking about, has Jimmy Stewart ever played a villain? At some points in this movie, his psychosis has overcome him, and he has become morally gray, to say the least.
Yeah.
Specifically in the second half of this film, he has become so obsessed with Kim Novak's character from the first half of the film that when he believes that he's seen someone who looks just like her, literally wants to dress that person up as the Kim Novak character from the first half of the film. And that's kind of obsessively crazy. Not even from not only from a modern perspective, but even from a perspective from back then. So he's just psychologically just messed up in this film. And the way Hitchcock draws you in as a viewer, and what he does is he messes with you. Hitchcock loved to mess with the audiences. He could play us like we were an instrument. And that's what he does in this movie. And he does it throughout it by just having the Hitchcock twists. Just like what we believe to be true is not true. And there's a whole other set of circumstances that he's going to now tell us about that now change the aspect of the movie. And also the film has the vertigo shot, the pull focus, which is a shot that's used in so many movies now. Steven Spielberg did it in Jaws when the shark's in the water and Roy Scheider's character is sitting on the beach and he pulls focus like that. There's a great special effects shot in this movie where you just get the severed head of Jimmy Stewart's character, and you get the vertigo swirls because he's just having like a crazy nightmare situation. Yeah, that. And it's like this film has so much stuff in it that people took and then like re-emulated or sometimes spoofed later on or used later on in various ways, whether it be spoof or not, that it's such a foundational film from that perspective. I absolutely love this film and how deep it is, and that's why I put it at my number 2. And also Jimmy Stewart's fantastic in it as well.
Yeah, that's why I had it at my number 1. It's my favorite Hitchcock film. Of course, over the years, my Hitchcock top 5 or top 10 has changed because of how much more respect I've had for various films. But Jimmy Stewart, I mean, if it weren't for Jimmy Stewart, this movie wouldn't be as good as it is. He makes this movie, and of course, the Hitchcock blondes has always got a blonde. In this case, it's Kim Novak. She's opposite, and she works great opposite Jimmy Stewart. And Steven, you got any thoughts on Vertigo?
What else could I say? Once again, yeah, I mean, great opening to this movie.
Oh, yeah.
With the chase on the rooftop, and I mean, it's got a great opening, and then yeah, I mean, like you've said, I mean, San Francisco is very much a character. We just talked about Shadow of a Doubt on our podcast, and he he works in Santa Rosa, which is very close. He kind of does the same thing where, he very much makes the towns that he works in, if he's working on locations, as a character, so, that's what great storytellers do. They make everything important. And, working with Jimmy, he obviously had a good working relationship with Jimmy Stewart. And I'm sure Jimmy loved working with him because he gave him complicated characters and not just these straight up good guys. So yeah, I mean, it's another great one. It's definitely in my top Hitchcock films. It's one I think I just need to watch more. I think I've watched it a couple times, but it's just never completely been one of my favorites. I always kind of like Rear Window and I like Psycho and stuff like that. And Shadow of Doubt, we just watched that. I watched that for the first time. It's great too. So, but Vertigo, definitely.
Yeah, I didn't get to talk about Rear Window, but yeah, it's an all-time Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. You guys pretty much said everything anyways. But yeah, it's an all-time Alfred Hitchcock movie. It's not, I just didn't put it in because I didn't want to have two of the same director, or else.
I think also, like I said, I mean, Rear Window is maybe one of the most accessible of that, I could have went something more challenging just to be, because I wouldn't say Rear Window challenges my mind as much. That's probably why I go back to it so much. Because, you like challenging movies, but sometimes you like stuff that you can just pop on and just, you know what you're getting and it's great. And that's why I picked that one. But
I also really love the one shot in Rear Window is probably one of the best Hitchcock shots ever, is the one where you get the POV shot of Jimmy Stewart's character opening his eyes and Grace Kelly is just taking up the whole frame. And she's they made her they lit her so that she's glowing like a star or something. That's one of the most iconic shots, I think, from Hitchcock.
Yeah. All right. So, Andrew, you got any honorable mentions?
Oh man, for Jimmy Stewart, what can't you honorably mention? Basically, for me, like I said, Anatomy of Murder was an honorable mention. Philadelphia Story was an honorable mention. You Can't Take It With You is an honorable mention for me. Either Shop Around the Corner, which we also did a spotlight on for Cinema Discovery Project, Steve and I, is a really great film. I would highly recommend that film. And also the westerns with Jimmy Stewart with Anthony Mann, Winchester 73, Naked Spur, The Far Country, Bend the River are all really, really good, including The Man from Laramie as well. And you know what? Just because we talk about Hitchcock, The Man Who Knew Too Much.
You just took all of mine, Andrew.
Yeah, I was gonna say you basically said all the really.
I mean, you have to mention all of them, anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, at least the ones I've seen. So yeah.
Right.
I'm exactly with Steven. I mean, Man Who Knew Too Much. How the West Was Won. Oh,
I got more. I can go. Yeah.
How the West Was Won. Anatomy of a More. Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Those were all my honorable mentions. So
I mean, even something like Bell, Book, and Candle, which came out the same year as Vertigo and also starred Kim Novak and Jimmy Stewart, is also really good and underrated.
What also one of the other Hitchcock's, Rope.
Oh yeah, Rope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So that's basically all our honorable mentions. Andrew, go through your list from 5 to 1.
Number 5 was Harvey. Number 4 was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Number 3 was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Number 2 was Vertigo, and number 1 was It's a Wonderful Life.
And Steven, 5 to 1.
5 was Flight of the Phoenix. Number 4 was Anatomy of a Murder. Number 3 was Harvey. Number 2 was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And number 1 was Rear Window.
All right. My number 5 was Jeff Jeffries from Rear Window. Number 4, Macaulay Connor from The Philadelphia Story. Jefferson Smith from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. And John Ferguson from Vertigo. Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions. Steven, I guess we'll plug the podcast.
All right. You can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can find me on Instagram at Cinema Discovery Project, and on Letterboxd at Stephen Billings, Cinema Discovery Project on Letterboxd. And then, of course, you can listen to me and Andrew talking about various topics of movies on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, for our show Cinema Discovery Project. So we had Dan on, I think, at least once. We had way back in the day. We'll have to get him on again when we get the right topic. And
Yeah, pretty sad about that.
Oh, don't worry. Hey, let me tell you this. You're the only guest we've ever had.
Yeah.
So you should feel good about that.
Yeah, I do. I just thought I'd be back on by now.
Well, we the way we work, I think we
work great together.
We feel good, just us, and we would like to open ourselves up to having some guests, but it's just tough sometimes because sometimes we're in a crunch with what topic we want to pick. And so we ourselves have to do it fast. So then we don't want to have to bring in a third party to expect them to be ready too. So it's, but.
No, I understand. I completely understand. You can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also, I am a film critic. I write movie reviews. Right now, there's not a whole lot of movies out, but I do write for this website called disappointmentmedia.com. That's DISIPPIONTS. No S, media.com, disappointmentmedia.com. Right now, I've been just kind of coming up with anniversaries. I wrote an anniversary review of Pretty Woman. What's John Cusack one?
Say Anything?
No, but I did like that. I watched that very recently too. The one where he was a record store owner.
Empire Records?
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity. Also there was Jackie Robinson Day the other day, so I did kind of a retrospective on 42 and the Jackie Robinson story. Also, Brian Dennehy died, so I did a review of Rambo, my favorite action movie. And there are a couple of movies out, so you can see my review of Sorry We Missed You or Roads Not Taken with Javier Bardem. So there are some movies that are coming out, but not as many. So I've been doing a lot of retrospectives and anniversaries. You can look forward to my review of Gladiator and Braveheart coming up pretty soon. So for Andrew, Stephen, and myself, goodbye, everybody. Oh, and real quick, real quick, stay tuned for more classic episodes. We're going to be doing Billy Wilder, obviously this one on Jimmy Stewart, Grace Kelly, and classic musicals for the entire month of May. So just stay tuned for those. All right, so goodbye, everybody.